Okay, it is now 6:35. We are in the boardroom at Nashua High School North. It is February 11th, 2020, and this is the Finance and Operations Committee. Do we have someone to call the roll? Do we have the book? Sorry.
I could do if you want me to.
Okay, thank you, Paula. Thanks. Ms. Johnson is here?
Oh, okay, Mrs. Oden?
Yes?
Mr. Guarino's not here right now. Mrs. Johnson is present.
And
Mrs. Zeem, not here.
also we have
Heather Raymond, President of the Board.
Yes, also here is Mr. Donovan representing administration, and we have somebody to present. We have Dan Weeks here, thank you, Doria Brown, Greg Rodriguez, and Sean Smith. So thank you, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Donovan.
Okay, we're going to change the agenda slightly, the order of the agenda, so we'll move to item number 2 to start. This is an IT contract. Now, I'll turn it over to Mr. Rodriguez in a minute, but we did go out for a bid for the, if you recall, with that extra $1 million that we were given and we approved, we agreed that we would buy switches for the 2 high schools. So we did an RFP, we sent that out, and we got 3 responses, one of which was inadequate, so it basically came down to 2 other choices. We had decided to move forward with one of those 2. But in the meantime, would you like to finish that?
So what we did for the IT department is we hired a consultant for E-rate. So E-rate is the discount funds that we get to purchase connectivity and equipment for internet connectivity. And the consultant urged us to put in another RFP for the switches and the access points again, so to actually have to go through the E-rate process. So that's one step that we were unaware of. So we resubmitted the RFPs yesterday, and it has to go through a 28-day process for more bids to go out. So the bids will be closed on March 9th at 10 a.m. And we're asking to hold off on a vote tonight for the bids, just because we feel that makes the most sense, because we need to have the E-rate for a better discount rate.
Thank you. I know we save money using E-rate.
Right.
So do we anticipate that the quotes coming back might be cheaper, or because we use E-rate in the quotes that we eventually will save money?
Both, actually. So we can anticipate, more competition is good, and we can anticipate, a discount rate with a better bid. So.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense to me, and thank you for watching out for this. I know you're new to it. I know that the late Director of Technology was very familiar with E-rate and promoted it to other districts. So thank you for watching out for the money and for coming forward and say, let's hold on until we get a little bit more information.
Right. Thank you, Mrs. Oven. Just putting the brakes on it just for a little bit. I think in the grand scheme of things, a month isn't really too long, so we can really have a better plan and work with our consultant moving forward for E-rate. So,
okay.
Yep.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Rodriguez, and let's hope. It'll be interesting to see where the new quotes come in. And you anticipate more people bidding on it, do you?
Yeah, what we like to do is to keep it more local too, just in case if there are any issues. We don't contracting somebody from, let's say, California or Texas. It's easier to have somebody in a smaller radius to come and do some work, because these are experts in the IT field. We have very good staff members with us right now, but there are definitely higher level IT folk that could help us with larger issues. So that's what we want to keep within a smaller radius.
And it's my understanding that if one of these switches goes down, we lose tremendous amount of computer capacity.
Yes, so we did run into that a couple weeks ago. We had one switch go down at South, and we did lose the ability in an entire wing to use wireless and desktop computers. So, and we have we have aging infrastructure around 15 years old, which in the IT world that's considered ancient. So we have a lot of very old switches within the district.
Okay.
So this is long overdue.
Okay, thank you so much,
Yeah, no
Mr.
problem.
Rodriguez, and thanks for watching out for our money. Thank you.
Mrs. Oden?
Yes.
I'd like the
Miss-
record to show that Mr. Guarino arrived at 6:38 PM.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Raymond?
Thank you. Was the internet fixed in that wing at South, or is it still down?
It was fixed, so it was remedied the same day. We had a spare older switch that we just put in and plugged it all in, and it was all set within the day.
Okay, but that one's even older, so...
It's around the same age.
Okay,
Yeah, yeah.
okay, fingers crossed.
Thank
you.
Anybody else have any questions or comments? Okay, thank you so much, and hopefully we'll be seeing you in about 4 weeks. Maybe our next meeting or the one after, or with some good news.
I would love to come.
Okay.
All right, have a good
Thank you
night.
so much. You too.
We'll bring them for the budget meeting before then, so you get to see them twice in a month, and that, for most people, is a very rare occurrence, right?
Very rare.
Oh, you're so lucky.
I am so pleasure.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is...
Go to number
is it
1.
The solar presentation. Okay,
Okay,
Mr. Weeks?
sure, this is live, okay. Dory, should I defer to you for a quick overview from City Hall, or do you want me to dive in? Great.
There, now I can see it. Should we put it back on so we can see Dory? Doria?
I think we can see her.
Okay.
It's okay. Hi, I'm Doria. I'm the energy manager for the city, and I'm actually.
Oh, your mic is not on.
Oh, it's not?
Tap
Is it?
in the middle, the push.
It's on?
Okay. There we go.
You got it.
Hi, I'm Doria. I'm the energy manager for the city, and I'm going to do a quick overview about solar. This isn't new to some of the people on the board. We were here last year to talk about Dr. Chris, but we are again proposing to do solar on Dr. Chris Elementary School, which would be very important to the school because it would improve on our ability to be resilient in this energy market. So as we are in New England, energy prices are forever going to be increasing, and having solar on a building here is an opportunity for the schools to take back power in their power consumption. So this is an opportunity to be able to sort of regulate the price that we're going to be paying for energy and to have a greener energy source, so renewable energy on our schools. It's just a fantastic opportunity to be more resilient and to get more savings for our energy consumption. So I'm going to defer to Dan Weeks to continue on to this presentation, but it is an awesome opportunity.
Okay. Thank you, Doria, and thank you very much to the members of the committee for the opportunity to present to you again. I had the occasion to come last fall, some months ago, and I'm pleased to say that in the intervening months, I've had the opportunity to work further with City Hall, Doria, and the mayor's office, and also with Sean Smith and Dan Donovan to develop, we think, some good developments in the proposal, trying to take into account some of the feedback and questions that were asked by this committee previously. And I'm pleased to present here some updated numbers for the Dr. Crisp School proposal, which you saw last fall, as well as an option for a second school at the school district's request. We completed a site evaluation of Fairgrounds Middle School and have an engineering proposal and PPA proposal to accompany that for the committee to consider. And if the committee wishes to refer one or both to the full school board, both are ready for consideration. For just brief background on the process, before I get into the presentation, just by way of introduction, my name, as you know, is Dan Weeks. Besides being a representative of Revision Energy, one of our 270 employee owners living here in New Hampshire as well as in Maine, I'm also a Nashua resident, live at 7 Shattuck Street in French Hill, and a parent taxpayer, and so very honored for the opportunity to be presenting these options to the school district, and hope that someday my kids, who are still very young, will have the opportunity to attend solar-powered Nashua Public Schools, whether with Revision or some other partner. So thank you very much for this opportunity. I think you're fairly familiar, but I know there are some new members of the school board and on this committee. So for brief background on Revision Energy and how we came to be here presenting these options, as I briefly noted, we are an employee-owned business. That means I, as our Director of Market Development, have an equal stake in the company with the men and women, many of them in their 20s or early 30s, who actually build our systems, electricians and apprentices. We operate the first in-house apprenticeship training program to train the next generation of solar electricians, the first in the country. And we take great pride in not just developing, financing, making deals happen, but more importantly, actually building systems and then servicing them for their entire lifetimes. So that's something that we do in-house. So far, we've constructed more than 8,000 solar energy systems, as well as complementary clean energy systems around electric vehicles and battery systems, LED lighting, et cetera, totaling nearly 100 megawatts of installed capacity with another 70 in active development. And just a note on the left, we are also a certified B Corporation. The B stands for benefit. And what that means is we've gone through a multi-year process of earning the designation as a, if you will, socially responsible business. That means we legally commit through our corporate charter to operate in a triple bottom line manner, where although profit is part of what we do to sustain the business, before profit comes people and planet. And that's part of the B Corp sort of certification. We've been very proud to be recognized for the last 3 years as the #1 rooftop solar installer in New England by Solar Power World Magazine, the main trade publication, and #5 in the US. And a quick word on our local work, and I think most relevant to this discussion is the work we've been honored to complete for the city of Nashua. You see in the upper left there, we completed in December installation of 2 solar arrays for the Lake Street Fire Station and the transit garage, not far from here. Those systems are the first of what the city intends as a expanding portfolio of solar projects, mostly on-site, where you can use that electricity at highest value because you're offsetting the most expensive power otherwise purchased from the grid. And so we're actively working with Doria and others at the city to identify the next set of projects that will have the most benefit for taxpayers. But we've also been excited to work with other local nonprofits, and a sampling of them here would be the Nashua Soup Kitchen and Shelter, now more than 2 years ago, Crosswick Christian Church, where I happen to attend, Hollis Montessori School, Boys and Girls Club in Manchester. We're excited to be working also with the Nashua Boys and Girls Club at present, and others in the area. And for the Nashua projects, as some on the committee are aware, we went through an extensive RFP selection process. Starting about a year ago, the city released a request for proposals. Several companies responded from New Hampshire and from the region. And through a series of interviews and follow-up submissions, we were honored to be selected as the city's vendor. Initially, the city had us assess 25 different facilities. Regrettably, only a few of them were solar ready for the first wave last year, but it is the city's intention to continue adding as roofs are ready, as the facilities are really ideally situated to have solar added, and that's dependent on a lot of different factors, but we're excited to be working with the city to identify the next ones. And then in connection with that, for a few years now, I've done preliminary work with Sean and his team to assess different school district facilities. And as you are aware from the presentation last fall, Dr. Crisp was brought forward by Sean and Dan as the first solar-ready school based on the recent replacement of the roof. And then we were also advised recently that Fairgrounds Middle School, which also had its roof replaced fairly recently, and where the upcoming renovations are interior renovations which won't be affecting the roof surface, that would also be considered solar-ready. So they asked us to assess that as well for tonight's presentation. Any questions on our local work or the city selection process? Yes, please.
I just wondered, who asked you to assess that? Somebody from the school department or from the city hall?
From the school department.
From school department, Sean?
Yes,
Okay.
we replaced the roof at Fairgrounds Middle School, 2 summers ago? Mm-hmm. So that's one of the main criteria if you're going to consider putting solar on a roof, is it's a recent roof.
Okay.
You don't want to have to take all the panels off, and then, if it's only halfway through its life. So, yeah.
Yeah.
That's a big project, I know that one. Thank you.
Thank
I have a
you.
question.
Ms.
Yes, as
Johnson.
I'm listening to the presentation, the roof has to be a new roof to put it on, or it has to be in reasonably good condition?
Great question. It doesn't have to be a new roof. And of the 8,000 systems we've installed, most of those roofs are somewhere between 2 and 10 years old. When a roof is over 10 years, certainly 15 years or older, we generally discourage the installation of solar. Some owners will choose to go forward anyway or have a professional roofing contractor come and do an inspection. But in this case, these roofs are both around 2 years old, I believe, and so that would be considered an ideal time. And on that note, I should add, we having installed on many of these same rubber membrane roofs in the past, most of which are under warranty at the time we install. We go through a rather extensive process with the roofing manufacturer, where they, we bring them in to conduct an assessment of the roof quality prior to the installation and after the installation, so that they sign off and verify the roof is indeed still under warranty and the school district is incurring no risk as a result. So that's something we've done many times with all of the major roofing manufacturers. These are black EPDM rubber membranes, and so we've been accustomed to working to preserve those roof warranties.
I don't want to jump ahead on my questions, so I'm going to just write them down at the end of the presentation. I'll just finish asking all my questions.
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, moving into it, just a few of the other nonprofits we've worked with in the area, including a number of educational institutions, some higher ed, and then on the commercial side, some of the businesses that we've been proud to work with. Let me get right into it. So on the design and engineering, and I'll start with Dr. Crisp, which will look familiar from last year with just one update, and then show the opportunity that we've designed for Fairgrounds. So you're familiar. I don't know how many of you take a look at the satellite imagery, but it's always fun to see from the sky what these roofs look like. You have a lot of available roof space, not very many rooftop units, HVAC equipment, so plenty of opportunity to put that roof to productive use. And I would note, as I'm sure some of you know, Dr. Crisp actually had an early solar array back in the, was it 1980s? And so when I spoke with additional facilities personnel, they were very confident that that roof is more than capable of accommodating the weight. When we talk about adding solar, and I'll show some images of what it looks like, we're adding between 4 and 7 pounds per square foot without any mechanical attachments. So we don't actually penetrate the roof membrane at any point. And that's one of the ways we ensure that the roof warranty remains in full effect. And so we are adding requisite weight in addition to the panels to meet the wind loading requirements, thereby avoiding the need for any attachments or penetrations of the roof, And naturally, any facility we install on first has to go through a full structural review. We work with an independent professional engineer who applies their PE stamp once they've done the full assessment. Sean, thankfully, has already provided the structural plans for these two buildings, so we have a high level of preliminary confidence. We haven't yet contracted with the professional engineer, but we've done an internal review and are confident that the facilities can accommodate the weight. Should we find a little bit down the road, if the school board proceeds and we conduct the structural review, should we find that it doesn't meet the structural requirements, the school district will be under no obligation to move forward. Naturally, it would be too costly to make structural upgrades to these older buildings, and so we do not expect that those would be made, and the projects would simply die at that point. So that's the satellite imagery, the engineer's rendering of the solar array, and this looks very similar to what you may recall seeing in the fall, with the one difference that we, since that time, have now started installing a higher efficiency solar panel. Every year we see an incremental increase in the amount of power that the individual panel puts out. Last year we were installing 350 watt panels. They're now up to 375 watts. That means the same number of panels will put out some additional power. And fortunately, although some other factors have been pushing up the price of solar, the price of the panels themselves has been coming down slightly. And so you'll see that the cost is a little bit more advantageous. The savings are a little bit higher, as I'll show you in a minute from this rooftop. So this system adds up to 357 kilowatts of DC capacity. That's close to 1,000 solar panels with 402,000 kilowatt hours of annual energy output. And then for your interest, and I'm happy to send these technical specifications along, this shows the production month by month from January through December. Naturally, much lower winter production, and you see in those first few bars in the upper left, we model for substantial snow cover during the winter months, when we do not recommend that the school district expend any money sending crews up to clear the panels of snow. We simply build that into the financial model, so we're assuming that lower production and lower revenue or savings as a result of snow cover. But again, the professional engineer is certifying that the weight of the panels plus the weight of snow will not compromise the structural integrity. If the PE cannot certify that, then again, the projects do not go forward. The second and new opportunity that we've not yet presented, but we're excited to design just in the last week after the request from the school district, is Fairgrounds. As you can see, very substantial roof, some more recent facilities added in the original building in the center. We do have somewhat differing opinions on the structural integrity, and so we'll of course go through that structural review with care if the school district moves forward. We know that the more recently added sections along the west on the left side and in the northeastern corner in the upper right, that those sections do have more structural capacity than the original building. Although when I had the opportunity to inspect the facility last week with the on-site janitor, it was his opinion from experience that based on the design of the structure, that it would easily support the weight of panels. Again, we will go through a formal independent engineer's review to certify that, but we are proceeding currently with a full roof design and would simply scale that back if portions of the roof didn't meet the structural requirements, but the district wanted to proceed with the portions that did. What that looks like is a 650 kilowatt DC array. That's nearly 2,000 solar panels with 765,000 kilowatt hours of energy output. And for your interest, I can elaborate if you'd like, but you see two numbers there in terms of kilowatts DC and kilowatts AC. Kilowatts DC represents the maximum power output of the panels. imagine that all of the panels are operating at peak power with full sun shining on all of them, no shade conditions, et cetera, no cloud conditions. That's the maximum power output at a given moment in time. The AC rating is the inverter rating. The inverters are converting, and I can just show you a picture. These are the white inverters, which are converting that raw DC direct current power from the panels into alternating current, which directly feeds the building electrical gear to power the building in real time. And the AC rating is what the utilities measure in terms of the interconnection requirements, and we have deliberately sized this under 500 kilowatts AC for the reason that from our extensive work with Eversource, formerly Public Service Company, they require systems over 500 kilowatts to incur a very expensive piece of utility equipment called a recloser at an additional cost of $100,000 typically. And so although we could theoretically maximize the roof with some additional panels in the upper right section, for example, we think it is advantageous in order to save costs to downsize it slightly to keep the AC rating just below 500 kilowatts. Maybe more information than you needed, but just a quick distinction between DC and AC. This may look familiar, but like the city buildings we've installed recently, these are ballasted rooftop systems on flat roofs. Again, no penetrations made in the roof membrane. The cinder blocks you see are pressure treated for a few decades of freeze and thaw cycles, and those provide the required weight to meet the wind load standard so that there's no chance of wind uplift, literally picking the panels up off the roof and taking them off the roof. So we know that we meet the wind requirements without requiring those mechanical attachments. And that's what takes us to the between 4 and 7 pounds per square foot structural requirement.
I have a quick question. You're talking about wind load. Do you have, does that take into account like 100-year storms or something like that?
It does.
Okay.
Yes, the 100-year standard is what we are designing to.
Yep.
And I should note that our full engineering packs require approval at City Hall through the permitting department. So our engineers, as well as the independent structural engineer, are submitting the full pack for review by the city's very qualified staff. And any questions or redesign comes back to us, and we ensure that we meet their standards. Having installed many systems in Nashua and in most communities across the state, we're pretty familiar with those requirements. I showed you already the inverters. Those can be mounted either inside or on an exterior wall. In the case of Fairgrounds, actually, we have ample space within the main utility room, wall space that's not being used for any other purpose, so they would be totally out of reach of any students or the public, easily protected in that way. The major solar equipment, panels, inverters, and I'm happy to elaborate if you wish. For your interest or for potentially student and teacher interest, the third item there is the DC optimizers, power optimizers. These are little devices attached to the back of each panel, which allow us to actually track the production of the individual panel in real time. So what the students would be able to, as a perhaps STEM class exercise, they would be able to log into a diagram looking something like this, and the panels would all be lit a different color depending on the power output at that given point in time. As clouds pass over, you would see a variation in the power output. And it's also a way that our service team can quickly determine if there are any service issues whatsoever and can pinpoint where those may be in case a connection does need to be corrected. But it's a tool that we find we love working with schools, with students and teachers, and can do a lot of analysis. We'll have a mini weather station on each of those roofs to track the solar, wind, precipitation conditions over the course of a year, and also make projections of future power output, et cetera. And then the major equipment there, the panels and inverters. the basic construction timeline, which I'm happy to elaborate if you wish. But typically on the order of 4 months from the time of contract signing for all the permits, for the utility interconnection approval, the structural analysis, et cetera. And then to give a representation, we're doing some additional analysis with data we just received from the utility on the consumption for every half hour at Fairgrounds. But this gives you a picture of the annual consumption versus solar generation. So in yellow, you see solar output peaks naturally in the summer months when we have the longest days, the most sunlight, much lower in the winter months when we assume substantial snow cover and are not, again, requiring or even recommending that the snow be removed based on cost of labor to do so. And then the gray bars are the consumption at the school, with lower consumption in the summer months when obviously the school has less use. On an annual aggregate basis, the system as designed would produce 18% more power than is consumed by Fairgrounds Middle School, and even additional excess power at Dr. Crisp. I didn't throw that chart on, but it can provide that as a follow-up if you'd like. And in real time, what this means is that the solar panels would be producing extra power, substantial extra power in the summer months, which would physically be powering the neighborhood, would be flowing out over the existing utility lines to power neighboring homes and Fairgrounds Elementary School across the street. And each kilowatt hour, each electron exported over the power lines would result in a net metering credit to the school, which would strengthen the cash flow so that in the summer months, the school is being paid by the utility for its excess production. In winter months, it is purchasing power. And the financials that I'll show you in a minute are the net of those sales and purchases. Any questions on the technical side before I dive into the financials? And feel free to come back to them, sure. Oh, sure.
So when we talk about the school system getting that credit for everything that goes out, is that like a rebate that the school system gets, or do they kind of like save it up and then apply those credits for later in the year? Or are all of our schools combined with the bill and then it just kind of offsets our bill at that time? Like, how does that work?
Great question. So there are two options that the school system can choose. One is a straight net metering, where the monetary credits from excess production in the summer accumulate on your bill and offset the next month's charges. And there are some charges on a monthly bill which are not being offset by solar. Every person with a utility account pays a customer fee. For residential, that's $13, but for larger commercial, that's anywhere from $30 to $100 roughly. And there are demand charges, which are based on your maximum usage at a given point in time. We can curb those demand charges, but we can't guarantee that we will curb them because those are based on the coincident peak, the moment in the course of a 30-day month, 31-day month, when you use the most power. And if that occurs when the sun isn't shining, then we haven't saved you in that respect. For that reason, we don't assume any savings in demand, but in reality, we see some savings in demand. But needless to say, your excess generation from solar first removes or reduces those other charges that aren't otherwise offset by solar, and then you carry a balance to reduce or remove your next month's bill. And at the end of the year, you have the opportunity through this direct metering, net metering option to get a cash out where the utility writes a check. Alternatively, you can group net meter, which is to assign one or more other accounts to that as members of that group where the on-site meter is the host. And in that case, the utility will write you a check each month to offset the charges on those other accounts if you have excess generation.
Okay. And then I guess the other question I had is the energy that's being produced by the solar array, when we're talking about output, is that after the consumption of the building, or is it like before? Like, so does the solar go directly out to the energy company, or does it go into the building for the building's use, and then whatever's left over goes out?
The latter.
Okay.
Exactly right. So in real time, when the sun is shining, the building is powered by solar. The power is fed directly into your main distribution panel, the large switchgear in the basement of Fairgrounds. And then any excess is then sent out over the existing connection through your transformer.
And if the solar array is not generating enough power to power the building on a given day because, it's cloudy or there's a snowpack or whatever, how does that work? How does the switch in the basement decide where it's getting some from, pulling some from solar and then some from the grid? Like, how does it figure that out?
Great
That might be too technical, but.
Yeah. So it operates seamlessly where the building can simultaneously draw solar electricity and grid electricity.
Okay.
And the solar inverters, which have advanced very substantially in the last handful of years, are designed to provide, to seamlessly match within a fraction of a second the incoming voltage of the power from the grid, so that they're delivering clean power, which is integrating seamlessly with the building electrical. This is how virtually every installed solar array works, even the small one at my home. They're matching grid power so that the equipment is fully protected, and when excess power is being generated, that simply flows out of the existing connection.
Okay. And one final question about that. Is there any concern about surges? I'm thinking about the surge protector that I have at my home for all of my electronics. Is there anything that we have to be cognizant about when using solar in addition to the grid? Or
Yeah.
is that just the same as we would use at home?
Fortunately not, for the reason that the solar inverters operate as the managers or gatekeepers. We think of them as kind of the brains of the operation. The panel is inert. It's tempered glass, silicon cells, and aluminum. It's the inverters that are converting that power, and they are imposing a maximum on the amount of power that's delivered based on their rating. They're matching the voltage and frequency of the incoming power. And so of the 8,000 systems we've installed, we have never had any surge issues, and we carry warranties with the inverters in the event they were to occur.
Thank you. I appreciate your patience and clarity.
Good questions. Thank you. Okay, moving into the all-important financials. The designs hopefully make sense, but the financials are, I know, your primary responsibility as elected board members. And let me just start by saying that we felt some very good questions were raised in the fall when we were before you last time. And I thought it might be helpful to quickly provide an overview of how the tax credits work, why this third-party financing mechanism of the power purchase agreement is recommended, and hopefully I can address those concerns, and by all means, please come back if I do not. So the way in which virtually every, and I think I can say at this stage, in New Hampshire, every municipal solar project has been financed. And this is true of virtually every nonprofit project, school project, is rather than the host, the municipality, purchasing the full array on day one, which would incur a large capital cost, 6 figures or even low 7 figures. Rather than that, the host tax-exempt entity partners with a mission-aligned investor who has the ability to take advantage of the federal tax incentives and to pass those savings on to the district through this power purchase agreement. And one of the questions raised is, where's that money coming from, and who is the investor partner, and how are they benefiting? Which are very good questions. And so I'd love to just address them at the top and then walk through the financial model here. So the primary incentive available for solar in the United States is called the investment tax credit, or ITC. Until last year, the amount was 30% of system cost. That's stepped down now to 26%, and it will continue to step down until it lands in 2 years at 10%. And so delaying does incur some additional cost or avoid some additional savings. And that is, in their wisdom, the Congress has determined that they will direct incentives through the tax code, which means that if you are an entity that pays federal income tax to the IRS, you can reduce that tax liability. But if you're a school, a municipality, a nonprofit that is tax exempt, you cannot access any of those benefits. For a quick comparison, collectively, we, as the American taxpayers, spend a few $billions a year in so-called tax expenditures for solar projects, which is a small fraction of what we spend each year and have done for decades to subsidize fossil fuel energy. My personal opinion is that it would be wise to maybe do away with all those incentives, and so let different sources of energy compete based on an open market. But for various reasons, that is not the system we have. And so we think while collectively taxpayers are spending tens of billions of dollars in fossil fuel subsidies, there is a reason for the smaller clean energy subsidies to remain in place. But we'll defer to the wisdom of the government in Washington to make those decisions going forward. The reason that we recommend this approach is a financial one. The incentives are fully available in this power purchase agreement mechanism. This financing mechanism has been developed actually by the federal government at the Department of Energy, the National Renewable Energy Labs, and it's been blessed by the IRS. It is the mechanism by which virtually every large-scale solar project in this country, and as I said, every municipal project in New Hampshire has been implemented. And what it means practically, to flip forward one slide here, is that the investor partner, and I'll say another word on who the investor partner is, but because they are the legal owner of the solar array for at least 5 years, that's what the IRS requires in order for them to be able to take advantage of the tax credit, they are the one who puts up all the capital, so there's zero upfront cost to the Nashua School District. They're the one who is responsible for owning and operating and maintaining it, so if any performance issues arise, if any panels are not producing as they should, we're actually doing the monitoring for them, under contract with them, but they are responsible and we are acting on their behalf, but the school district is not incurring any risk for the performance of the system. Because they are a taxed entity, they're able to reduce the initial investment based on the 26% investment tax credit and to sell the renewable energy credits. And then they pass on almost all of those savings to the host. And let me pause on that for just a moment. Many of the large solar projects in the United States are financed actually by Wall Street. And they see solar as a very sound investment. If the sun stops shining, we have bigger problems here on planet Earth. So we see a lot of capital flowing from profit-driven banks into large-scale solar projects. However, those investors simply don't have an interest in small-scale projects, particularly in a state like New Hampshire that doesn't have any state incentives. So the financial return is not as strong. What we have done, because of the lack of commercial investor interest in projects like this, is we've worked over the last decade at Revision Energy to create something called Revision Solar Impact Partners, where we have been engaging families and some businesses in different communities around the state who are, in most cases, already solar powered, so they have a desire to, they understand the technology and they wish to see more of it deployed. Many of them share our mission of becoming more energy self-sufficient, reducing costs, supporting local nonprofits, and they have agreed to provide the capital needed at a rate of return that is around 1% per year, so just enough to cover their costs of administering the system, and thereby provide the financing at a much lower cost than would be available from the commercial market so that schools and nonprofits can afford to go solar. The investors provide approximately half of the capital required to build the systems, and they take, as I said, approximately 1% a year in return. They also raise the remaining half as debt from a variety of different lenders. Our largest single lender is the New Hampshire Community Loan Fund, which is also a public benefit institution. We have some local families that have also lent for these projects. Because lending can attract current rates of return around 5%, we have to model a slightly higher cost of capital for that portion of the project finance at between 4 and 5%. So the investor owner provides half the capital. They can take advantage of the tax credits, and they require approximately 1% a year in return. The lenders providing the other half of the capital. In order to be able to access that capital based on market conditions, we have to pay a bit more at between 4 and 5%. And we've been very fortunate that local families, in the case of the City of Nashua projects that we installed last year, Worthen Industries, a longtime Nashua manufacturer, and the Worthen family provided all of the capital to finance those projects and took a very low rate of return. And we see it as a kind of win-win where businesses or families already invested in the community who want to see, they think of these as kind of solar energy, clean energy endowments. Obviously, a public school system, unlike some private schools, doesn't have an endowment to fall back on, but if it has an energy generator that will serve it for decades to come, that is a way that it can reduce its cost in the future. So they see it as a benefit for the community. They believe in this type of investment. They can reduce their tax liability, so they see it as a win-win. And we've been fortunate to have Worthen Industries in the case of the Nashua projects, and we hope continued projects for the city and some other families and businesses in the area provide the capital. So I know we didn't elaborate in the fall. I hope that was helpful. We do try to be as transparent as possible, and we consider it an exciting program that really can build local interest on different sides of the project. With all that said, to get right down to the numbers, so for the two projects that we've looked at on the engineering side, the initial cost, which would be financed by the investor partner, comes, in the case of Dr. Crisp, to a little under $700,000. In the case of Fairgrounds, the larger system, at about $1.25 million. The upfront cost to Nashua School District would be $0. You would instead purchase the electricity from that solar array for a starting rate of 8.75 cents per kilowatt hour, which is approximately 15% less than the current all-in cost of electricity. It's a little different at each of the schools, and we can get more into the modeling, the analysis there. So to begin with, the portion of your power generated by solar would be less expensive than your current electricity costs, so you'd be saving some money from the beginning. Those rates, the 8.75 cent, rise by 2% a year, which is designed to roughly follow projected future inflation in electricity costs, which the federal government projects at 2.5% a year. And then if the school district chose and was in a position, and again, especially for the new committee members, this is entirely optional. It is in the school district's financial interest if it's in a position to perhaps in partnership with the city through a bond to acquire the systems. It is advantageous to do so because from the moment you own the systems, you're generating your own power instead of spending 8.75 cents per kilowatt hour for each unit of electricity generated. So if the city chose in year 6 to purchase the system, the Dr. Crisp price would be a little over $400,000, the Fairgrounds price about $750,000. And then if we factor in that purchase price in year 6, the modest loss in solar output, we build into the model a 0.5% per year loss in power output from the panels based on the federal research. We also assume an annual cost for operations and maintenance, which is optional but recommended for systems of this size so that Sean and Dan and their team aren't having to worry about getting electricians up on the roof to ensure the systems are at their peak production. When we build in all the costs and the gradual loss in power, the savings for Dr. Crisp come to about $645,000 over the 25-year warranty period, or $1.23 million at Fairgrounds. And then if you extend that out for the full commercial lifespan of the array, which is projected to be minimum 40 years, and we have systems in the United States and many more in Europe that are already 40 years and more old and still producing power. Those long-term savings using, again, the government projections on future electricity inflation at 2.5% a year come to about $1.75 million at Dr. Crisp and $3.25 million at Fairgrounds.
Yeah, let me get this straight.
Yes.
Okay. With the solar, you're talking about a 5-year lease, and on year 6, you can buy it out, right?
That's correct.
Okay, because I know a lot of the non-commercial is usually 20-year lease because the cost is so high that you extend it out for 20 years. So in 25 years, we're going to have a net savings, including buyout, of $645,000. That's what we're going to save over 25 years, $645,000, or $1.2 million on Fairgrounds. I don't think that's a very big savings over 25 years for the cost of this. I understand about the green energy and getting off of fossil fuel and all that, but I'm looking these numbers here. 8.75 cents a kilowatt hour, that's somewhere what we're paying right now, give or take with Eversource, okay? I haven't looked at my bill, maybe it's 9.2 something cents a kilowatt hour right now.
Dario knows.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry to interrupt you in the middle of your question, but that price, that 8.75 cents, that's what you're getting when you're paying for this energy from the solar panels. When you pay for energy from Eversource, you're actually paying that unit for your kilowatt hours, that 8 or 9 cents that's on your bill, plus your delivery fees. So you aren't paying delivery fees with this solar. You're cutting that out of your bill every month or every year. You're not paying delivery fees. So that's that savings.
And that's where a residential bill, when you add the mandatory charges for the delivery of the energy, comes to about 18 cents. And on a commercial facility, it's between 10 and 12 cents.
Okay, I get that with the demand because I did Ambit Energy for a while. But I would, since I'm a new board member here, and I didn't get to see the last presentation, I'd like to see if we take this and compare it with the fossil fuel for 25 years. And I want to see what the cost and savings is completely, because $645,000 isn't a lot to save in 25 years. 40 years, 1.73. I mean, if you probably did in today's dollars and tomorrow's dollars, I don't know what it's going to be. But to me, for the cost of this, and then you say that, in 6 years, if you want to do the buyout, we can always bond it. My God, if I hear one more word of bonding, people don't understand. Bonding is a loan. You have to pay it back. And it depends about how much interest and how much bonds are out there between the school and the city. It all comes from the same pot. You just separate it into different areas of the government. But it all comes through that taxpayers' dollars, which, again, the mayor talked about 3 to 5% increase this year on our tax bill. So I'm not 100% because I've seen presentations on my house for solar. I've asked all the questions about the buying, the leasing, the roof. I'm concerned that what happens on the roof, if the shingles get broke or something, the shingles get damaged, what do we do? Are you coming back if it's on year 7 and we don't do the buyout or in between? I mean,
Yeah.
it all sounds good, but we're New England. And our sun doesn't shine the way it does down in Florida in the Southwest. That's where you really get your savings from. And the banking of it, the pay down, I'm just not convinced at this point because I didn't see the original presentation. I'm coming in on the back, the end of the book, not at the beginning of the book. And I really want to see a chart 25 years out, 40 years out, what's the actual cost on fossil fuel in comparison to saving $645,000. That, to me, in my brain, is not a lot of savings in 25 years on the cost of this for either school.
Thank you so much. If I can respond to a few of those points. So just to ensure you understand, the savings projection is after the buyout. So we're not deducting that savings from the buyout cost. That's built in with the cost. So the revenue would be that plus the buyout, but we want to deduct that, of course, from your actual projected savings. One, I think, useful way to think about the power purchase agreement, first of all, that buyout is optional. So if the school district decided in year 6 that it didn't make sense or it wasn't in a position financially to buy it out, it could defer until year 8 or 9 or 10 or any year up through 25, or it could simply buy out at no point. In that case, what you would be doing is buying the power from the array at a price lower than the grid electricity, but you wouldn't be realizing the maximum available savings. With respect to these roofs don't have shingles, these are rubber membranes. And the roofs typically come with a 25 or 30-year warranty. We've worked with a lot of roofing manufacturers, and the guidance they give us is that the actual lifespan of these roofs is 40, 50 years, sometimes more. But should they need to come and service a portion of the roof, the panels can simply be lifted off that section of the roof if it needs to be redone. Or if needed, the panels could be removed from the entire roof and put back on, but there's a labor cost to do so, of course, which is why we recommend looking at new roofs. The last thing, if I could just say, to the kind of comparison to fossil fuels, I think it's useful to think of the current purchase of electricity as also a power purchase agreement of sorts, except you don't have any control over what the rates are. The rates are what the utility charges and what you can negotiate on the supply side, but the distribution, the transmission, and the other utility charges are what they charge. We have seen historically and analyzed the data going back a few decades, historic rises of around 3% a year, 3.2% a year on average going back the last few decades. We think we should be a little more conservative, so we assume 2.5% a year based on the government projections. But at this point in time, the school district is obligated to pay whatever is charged for electricity. This is a way in which that, for one, you can know what that future cost will be, and you can reduce that if you choose by purchasing the power. And I would just draw your attention to one other slide, which shows the long-term cost, the unit cost of that electricity. On the right side, the current rate at just under the rightmost, the black bar there is the current cost of electricity at just under 10 cents per kilowatt hour. When we take the government projection at 2.5% a year, the average cost going out over 40 years would be 16.2 cents per kilowatt hour. Just a projection, we don't know for certain. On the left side, on the solar side, though, we do have a very high degree of confidence on what those long-term unit costs are. On the left, if you go with the PPA and buy it out in year 6, you're locking in a long-term rate when you factor in the buyout cost, the operations and maintenance cost, the reduction in power output, a long-term rate of about just under 5 cents. If you didn't buy it out but took the PPA all the way to year 25 and then owned it thereafter, that average cost would be a little over 8 cents.
Mrs. Oden, may I do a follow-up? Okay. So right now, you're projecting 8.75 cents a kilowatt hour. That's what you're saying, 8.75?
That's what the starting cost would be.
That's what the starting cost will be. So how are you projecting if it goes up? Is that kind of going off of like what Eversource has for their kilowatt hours?
So the model here, the middle row there, PPA rate escalator is 2% a year. And that's because one of the things that our investor partners do require in exchange for taking a very low rate of return is predictability. So they want to run a cash flow and know that a certain amount of revenue will come in to pay down the investment that they made to make themselves whole. And so knowing at 2% per year gives them that predictability. We don't know what grid electricity rates do. We just have, the decades of historical data and the projections. But it bumps up and down a little bit.
Fluctuates.
Right.
It goes with what's sold on the market and how much fuel there's out there. Okay, so you're talking 8.75 cents a kilowatt hour. That's what you're you're selling us right now, 8.75 cents a kilowatt hour.
Yes, ma'am.
And you're showing historically that it's going up about 2.5% on the fossil fuel end, plus the demand charges and the supply, and all that they add on to the bill.
The all-in cost.
Yeah, everything, so it drives it up. So we're talking 8.75 cents a kilowatt hour. So, and 2% because, so you're going to rise on us 2% a year.
That's what this model shows. We have some flexibility with our investor partners to say, let's have 1% a year, in which case the starting rate would be a little bit higher. So they're willing to be flexible, but one way or another, they need to be made whole.
So with the energy company I was with, Ambit Energy, if I wanted to buy the green energy, it was costing me, so if I was at 8.75 cents a kilowatt hour, that was just the supply end. That's what you're talking about here, just the supply end, basically.
This offsets supply plus the other charges.
Okay. It was higher on the supply end to buy that than to buy the fossil fuel end of it. I still would like to see, again, coming in at the end of the book, I'd like to see what it's going to look like, a projected sheet, 25 years on the buy. I'm not going to go 40 because I'm not going to be around 40 years probably from now. I'll be like 104 years old. I'd just like to see what 25 years is. I don't know, Mr. Donovan, maybe you could do something like that to see what exactly, if this is going to pay for itself or not, or is it we're just going to be spending and, that it's not, if I'm going to vote for this, I want to make sure there's a substantial savings 25 years out that we're saying it. I can't project 645,000 is that substantial unless I see the numbers in front of me. So I can compare apples to oranges here. That's exactly what it is. Thank you.
And we'd be happy to provide additional data.
Thank you. You had a slide earlier where you had other buildings, other customers.
Yeah.
That you had. So I'm interested in knowing about these customers and what their experience was. Hollis Montessori School, how long have they had that on there? Have they bought has it been 5 years? What was their savings? Maybe Manchester Boys and Girls Club, same thing. Some of the numbers on there. Also, their experience with installation. That was another question I had about. Obviously, probably installation is going to happen so that there's no disruption, in the school. Yeah. But I'd like to know a little bit more about, and actually some of these customers are right in Nashua, so we should probably be able to see how the Conway Arena is feeling about their purchase and the fire station. So maybe if we had some examples, and you could also bring in their savings, and if any of them, if it's been 5 years have already gone by and they purchased, and how that's gone, maybe that would help. Yeah. The board make this decision.
Yeah.
So.
In brief response, I would be more than happy to send our statement of qualifications or the original RFP response to the city. I know the city, through their extensive selection process, reached out to past clients. The ones seen here are more recent clients installed in the last year or two, so haven't yet reached the point of buyout. But I can say we've done over 150 of these power purchase agreements out of the 8,000 installed projects. And those that have reached the point of buyout have either bought out or are in the process of buying out. But I'll be glad to send to the committee the statement of qualifications, which includes several of the larger projects like this and the names, numbers, emails. If you would like to reach out, or if you'd like us to gather specific information beyond that.
Hello. I'd like to add one more thing to your question, Paula. So you were wondering about buyout and how we're going to be able to afford the system and what the difference is between fossil fuel and having renewable energy on the roof. So I can tell you that the schools in 2018 spent about $60,000 at Dr. Chris Elementary School for energy. If we were to buy this system and then put it on a bond, we would still have a savings bonding that system for 10 years at a 2.5% interest rate of about $12,000 to $15,000, depending on comparison with prices that Eversource is charging. So we would be bonding that for 10 years, right? And then we would still get another 20 years of savings from that system. So it's a benefit to the city because we'll be purchasing that renewable energy, but we won't be purchasing renewable energy at a higher rate like some people might do if they're kind of accounting for it off the grid. So when you purchase green energy off the grid, you're kind of offsetting your power. You're not directly purchasing that green energy. This is an opportunity to directly purchase that green energy at a lower price. So that doesn't often just come to people. This is a great opportunity for the city because we'd be able to have our own renewable energy and have it sent directly to our school. And as technology improves, we would have the opportunity for battery storage, which would then increase the resiliency of the system and also that benefit. This is an opportunity to build off of that and create sort of our own microgrids in Nashua. So no, that isn't equated in Dan's spreadsheet, but there is further savings to the system than we're seeing here. It's just a great opportunity. And that's all I had to say.
Ms. Raymond?
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Brown. I just want to make sure that I wrote down what you said correctly. So we spend last year $60,000 just for electrical costs at Dr. Crisp.
Yes.
And even after the bond, if we were to purchase this and bond it through the city, you're still projecting like a $10,000 a year savings?
Yep, so we would still be spending less money on that bond than we would be spending for electricity off the grid.
Okay. Wow. That's significant. Thank you. Ms. Johnson?
Ms. Johnson?
Thank you. 2 points. I'm just finish writing it. What's the life of the battery?
So we are not proposing a battery as part of this system.
No battery system?
I was just talking about future opportunities. I'm sorry if I mucked up the waters by
No, I was going to
bringing
ask
up
that
that.
anyway, and
Yeah.
when you brought up battery.
We do design all of the solar arrays to be forward compatible so that they are fully compatible for the addition of a battery system in the future. Right now, it is not economical in most cases, except some manufacturing facilities that have very spiky loads where we can shave those peaks. But we are beginning to design them. We're in the process of designing a battery system for the city of Keene, for example, and I think in the next few years it will be an economical option which could be added.
Okay, the next thing I'd like to ask, and I guess, Ms. Brown, you can ask Mr. Fedette about a bond. Give him the numbers, let him run the information on a bond for me. I can give him a call and ask him to run the bond for me,
Okay.
because he's the one who goes out and sells bonds for the city. You know, he's part of the selling of the bonds for the city, if I remember correctly, the city treasurer. And so, I mean, I can get the accurate numbers, I guess, if we can supply it.
Okay. And I can also tell you that the mayor is willing and excited about this project and would be willing to bond this because he thinks it's important for the city to invest in renewable energy.
You know, I know the mayor's excited about this, but, you know, here's the issue. When I sat in that meeting with the mayor, and he talked to all of us about spending and costs because what's rising in health insurance, you know, I have to sit and I have to answer to constituents like he does, and my first priority is making sure the students have what they need in the classroom. Yeah. And I've got to make sure that this is affordable to my constituents, the taxpayers of this city, versus bonding everything. It all costs money. Thank you.
Just to answer back, I'm not trying to do a back and forth, but this project would provide savings to your constituents. How much money could, I mean, not money, how many books can $685,000 buy? It's an opportunity to have those savings. And also, if we were bonding this project, we wouldn't be paying for that energy. The bond would be less than what we would be paying for energy every year, so you would still have a savings.
All I'm asking you to run me all the numbers between this and for 25 years out and the bond. And once I have the information, I can make a sound decision. But like I said, I'm reading the back of the book versus the beginning of the book. And so it's not kind of fair to myself and any of the other new board members that we don't know everything that was presented prior to. So I just need to be able to, you have to convince me to say that this is
appreciate
worth
that.
the dollars.
Yeah.
Okay, and if I get the numbers and it's worth the dollars, I'll be more than happy to support it. If I don't, then I can't. Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Raymond?
Thank you. This question is for either Mr. Donovan or Mr. Smith. We were talking about, I'm going to keep going back to what Ms. Brown said about how much we paid last year. Just at Dr. Chris, I think that was a good example, because that's not a very huge school. So I assume we pay quite a bit more for our larger schools. That comes directly out of the school district's budget and not the city budget? I'm confused on that, because it's not.
Yes,
Yes.
the electric comes direct, we pay approximately $2 million a year district-wide for electricity, covering all our facilities.
Okay, and so we're talking about doing this on 2 schools at this point, because they have the most appropriate roofing at this time. But, I mean, even if we're talking about a savings of, I mean, $10,000 a year on one school, that adds up if we can.
Right, and the Fairgrounds building, we pay about twice what we pay at, so, I mean, the thing is, you're saving money, and I understand the questions, and maybe we can put together some slides that show it better to help with Ms. Johnson's questions. But the reality is, we're saving money either way.
Okay.
So this is not costing us money, we're saving money.
Okay, and
Question of how much.
right. And then the other question I had was for Mr. Weeks. Is it possible for you to email the board a copy of this PowerPoint? Because I think it's really helpful. I know my husband will want to paw through it, but I'm certain that the other members who weren't able to attend tonight would like to look through it before this issue comes up on the main board.
Absolutely. And I've already spoken with our Nashua Community TV representative, so I will be sending it to him. I do know that previous presentations are also in the public domain, and we'll be glad to provide this as well.
Yeah, the previous presentation is on our website under the minutes for that, was it October?
I believe that's right.
October finance meeting. I forget. Oh, and then I just would like to encourage, because I'm not a voting member of this committee tonight, but I would like to encourage y'all to have the full board weigh in on this project, because I think the other 5 members would be interested to have this information and be able to vote on whether or not to move forward. So I do encourage you, whatever personal reservations you may or may not have, to send it to the rest of us, because I find this really interesting, and I'm sure that some of the other members who weren't able to be here tonight would be as well. So, thank you.
Thank you. I was going to ask for hard copies of these. I don't know about other members, but I think it's sometimes easier to see it and write on the paper. So if you could send hard copies of these to the Board of Ed members, I don't know if anybody here wants to say they don't want it, but I would like a hard copy. I think that would be helpful. I expected that tonight. I thought we were going to get that from what it said, but I personally would like a hard copy of this presentation. Thank you.
And I apologize if I missed a memo on bringing that tonight, but I will be more than happy to, as well as a much more detailed. I try to condense the information for the slides, but have an annual cash flow showing all of the expenses and saving categories, which I'll be glad to send as a follow-up.
whatever we get as the board, we do need to be able to get it to our support staff at central office so that it can be put on the website. Because anything that all the members get, the public should also have access to. So that's all.
Thank you. My question is to Mr. Smith and Mr. Donovan. Do you have a specific timeline you're looking for to get this project going? Were you looking to get it moving today or wait for more information to the rest of the board members? Or
My honest answer would be I would have liked to have moved forward back in October last year.
Yeah.
But I heard Mr. Weeks say it's a 4-month process to install.
Okay.
You probably want to be installing while school is not in session. So that means late June, July, get the bulk of the work done. So we probably do have some time, if that's our timeline. But you have to order stuff in advance. So if you were to back up from project completion to when you need the word go from the city, how much time would that be?
Right. Go ahead.
Sorry.
Go good.
That would argue for fairly prompt movement. The 4-month time is sufficient from contract signing, and I presume that would require a full vote of the board. And then the school district could opt to adopt the contract that the city executed. That's the standard PPA agreement that's actually developed by the federal government for this purpose. But certainly your lawyers will want to take a close look at it. If it were possible just in terms of the construction timeline, if it were possible for the committee to bring this to the board at a February or March meeting, and then if the board approved for the district and ultimately superintendent to then execute a contract by the end of March, I think we'd be in a good place to complete the installation before school reconvened in the fall. After March, it would be more difficult, and to some extent, we're at the mercy of the utility. On some larger systems, they will require actually an up to 3-month system impact study, before which, even though we do know the outcome of it, that they will approve systems based on our knowledge of the local infrastructure. We don't have formal approval to begin construction until that's complete. So we would want to begin that process as soon as possible.
I think at this point, what we'll do is ask for the hard copy to be sent to central office, let it go out to the other members, and we'll put it on our agenda for our next meeting, and we'll give a report and see where it goes from there, what kind of support we get. But I want to thank all of you for the presentation. I thought it was clear, I thought it was helpful, and saving money is a good thing, especially with our needs. I personally have solar on my home, so I certainly believe in it. I wish the finances could be different, where the city or the school district could realize some savings, but I understand the government controls how this is handled in the tax credit, which, is very different than what I would like to see, but I think it's important with all of our needs to save money. So thank you so much, Mr. Marino.
One more request of administration, if possible. Those other customers, especially the customers in Nashua that are saving money right now on energy costs, like the Conway Arena and the church and the fire station. Maybe along with the presentation, you can just nothing that's extensive, but just to show how much money they're saving, because they just recently installed those things, so you might have some older costs, and then you could say, this is what we're saving now. And maybe that would help the board members, see it in black and white, right in front of them, what the possibilities are for if we start to get going on Dr. Crisp. That would help them maybe make up their minds.
I'm just thinking, you people are here with all the knowledge and experience you have. If you would like to come to the next board meeting, should other board members have questions, I think that would be helpful.
I'll be there. Yeah.
And I would welcome the opportunity if that's possible.
Are you speaking about Monday night's board meeting, or are we talking about having this back in March and then March's board meeting?
I would say if we can get it into February,
Okay.
or before March, because I'd like to give people a little chance. I know this is the second time I've seen it. We've had some time. But if March is the deadline, I think if we had it on February's agenda, and then we could make a decision then, and if people still have some questions, it might go into March, and at least we would have the time to make the decision that it would be operable if it goes forward by the next school year.
Okay. Do you think you would be able to get us some of the information, especially the PowerPoint, by Thursday?
Sure, I
Okay.
can do this tomorrow.
Great, thank you. I know that's very, very tight.
Presentation is, I think, ready, and I'll add the more detailed financials, which I also have. I just didn't want to make us all squint tonight.
Okay, great. Thank you, I appreciate it.
Mr. Smith?
For Mr. Weeks, you can either email the presentation to Dan or myself. We'll make sure it gets distributed to everybody.
Perfect.
One question, so we can look at the local, Conway Arena and place like that, but for a really true comparison, you probably want to look at other institutions that have done this, school districts, colleges, universities. I know, for example, that Rochester School District has done an extensive amount of solar on the roofs of their schools. Probably Revision Energy was probably involved in Rochester. Was that you? Mm-hmm. So you can probably also give me some other names and references that I can check before the board meeting, so we have that information. But I know that Rochester was very pleased with theirs. Interlake's up in Meredith, they didn't put it on the roof, but they have it on the hillside. Pretty
that one as
good
well.
size array, and you did that one.
Yeah.
So there's actually, I want to say, better examples of institutional than Conway Arena. Conway's kind of a small facility. That's my only concern.
On Conway, we have just 1 month of data so far, so not the most representative. But I will definitely send, in addition to the PowerPoint and the more detailed financials, the list of references of other institutions with the contact details, and would, of course, welcome the staff or any school board members to contact directly.
Mrs. Oden?
Thank you for your suggestion, Mr. Smith. Ms. Johnson?
Ms. Brown, since we're rushing to get this done, if you can talk to Mr. Fedett about that?
I just wrote a note.
Okay,
Send him an email
perfect.
the second I leave.
Because my window isn't that, and if I miss him in the office, then I won't get the information. Thank you.
May I offer a last very quick note, and not to dwell on these final slides, but part of my motivation and our company's motivation to work particularly with schools is that we love educating the next generation, and selfishly, we want to recruit more young people into the trades. We see that as a good opportunity. And so just some quick examples of education that we do at schools, tours, information sessions, classes, displays that we love to put up so the students have an idea of what's on their roof. And then I mentioned at the top this workforce development program, our technical center, where we currently have about 60 apprentices, most of them recently out of high school or community college or also out of college, four-year degrees, who want to work with their hands and get their co-owners with me. They're paid a good wage and work while getting their electrical license over 4 years. So any opportunity, whether we have the chance to install or not, any opportunity to come and provide some educational information to students, curriculum support, we would love to do so. So thank you so much again.
Can I just ask?
Yes.
Do you have a mentoring program? Because we have a growing, robust CTE program. And I know they do have mentoring programs in some of the trades. But do you have mentoring programs for high school students?
We have done that in the
You
past.
have done that? Okay.
And would love to work with you or the district staff or teachers,
Okay.
principals, if there's interest in coming up with the right
Okay,
fit.
maybe we can contact the CTE people. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. Appreciate the chance.
The next item on the agenda, the bus contract, will be in non-public. Update on the copy usage.
Okay, if you recall, last month, I shared with you a comparison of the copy charges for both color and black and white from last school year to the previous school year. And you saw that there were significant increases, especially in the color copies. So there were some questions, and then we said, well, we have more data. We get information on a monthly basis now from our vendor, very detailed information if you want to dig into it by copier. But, so what we did was we took a look for the sheet that I handed out. If you, excuse me, flip to the page that says black in the top, sort of top left-hand corner, we'll start on that side. So what we did was we compared the costs that we spent in 18-19 to what we've spent thus far through December in this school year. And the good news is that you can see that the black copies on this side, all except for one school, which happens to be sort of Pennachuck Middle. If you look at the column that says projected volume, it's the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6th column over from the left. That's sort of where we're projecting based upon copies made to date. Okay, so on the black and white side, the good thing is there's only one that's currently running higher, and that's the Pennachuck Middle School. If you flip to the other side, this is sort of the bad news, which is the color copies. And as I mentioned last time, a black and white copy with our contract costs 1/3 of 1 cent. A color copy costs almost 5 cents a copy. That's an all-in price, but it's a significant difference. And all but 3 schools are higher on their color. So we've done some research where we've reached out to the schools. The schools don't honestly know all the answers, though they do have some. For example, Charlotte Ave was asked to do the entire kindergarten, entire district kindergarten institute curriculum. They printed all of that, much of it was color, in August. So their numbers are way up. The good news is what they said going forward. They did that big copy. They're not going to have that any longer. So that percentage that it's above should start to go down month after month now. Other reasons from some of the schools is students with visual impairments and cognitive disabilities, they print more things in color. But what they've begun to do with those also is to laminate them so they don't have to continually print them. Another one of the schools, the kindergarten curriculum, and then another one of the schools, it was the preschool. So it's our younger students, our newer programs where they're using more color. So we're asking them to think more about it. You'll see something when we look at the transfer entries. You'll see the additional cost we had this year versus last. If you remember, I put an extra $13,000 in the budget So we're really pushing back at the schools to say, okay, this color is much more expensive. If you need it, you can certainly use it, but stop and think before you do it. So I think by reaching out to the schools, a lot of times we'll get some sort of response. As I said, I'll give more updates on this later in the spring. What I've found in the past, when you reach out and start asking questions, if they don't have an answer, typically at least what they do is keep a better eye on the color copier. So, any more questions on that?
I just have a comment. Coming from a school, it'll be interesting to see if the price of laminating things goes up, because that laminating film is expensive.
Yes, it is. Now, that will be in their own supply accounts.
Okay.
And the difference with this is this comes all in at one central location and we pay for it. So when it's their money, they tend to be a little more careful with it.
Good, that's good. Okay. We have the January financial report.
Okay, since we had the presentation tonight, I'll just go through and hit the highlights. So if you flip in your financial report to the second report, which is the month-by-month report, it's on the third piece of paper in the packet. And if you go to the end of the report shows the spend to date is we've used 54% of our budget. Fiscal year, we're 7/12 of the way through, which is 58%. School year, we're 5/10 or half 50%. So the 54 is right in between those two numbers. So in total, it makes sense. So if you start on the first line, you'll see the wages full-time. As you know, that's about 80% of our cost. If you look under January, you'll notice it's 8.9 million, by far the largest month to date. And the reason for that is we had 3 biweekly pays. Since we got paid, the first biweekly pay was the 2nd of January, and the last was the 31st. So there were 3 biweekly pays and 5 weekly pays. So that's why you see such a high number. That's the last month you'll see that in this school year. The overtime number is actually lower. If you look at that this month, it's only 21,000. That's because we put through, the Park and Rec Department pays for the biddy overtime. When we have custodians that work overtime for the biddy games, we then transfer those costs over. So that actual transfer for the months of November and December took place, and that's why that was a $19,000 transfer. Make a note here on the 51600, the longevity account. That's 427,000. Now, we're looking into more detail by group, but that is about 27,000 higher than it's been the last 3 years. Our numbers for the last 3 years have been between 385 and 400. So the longevity payouts this year were higher. I've got a task that we're going to look through and see which groups it is, and I can report on that next month. So that ran over its budget line. But I'm hoping to make that up in a couple lines down. The retirement pay, I should be able to make up the overrun in the longevity by the savings in the retirement and separation pay. And then there's the last couple of lines there. There's some adjustments that need to be made to correct those numbers, but I won't get more accounting lingo. I won't get into all that now, but they're in the being corrected. So if you slide down to the professional technical services, legal services, you see there's a jump there. There was a $10,000 bill for an investigation. The instruction services, a couple lines down from that. You'll notice that was $63,000 higher than usual. We pay Clearway on a monthly basis, and we paid 2 months in January. We were behind a month, so that's what that was. And then the last item on that line, contracted services, is $66,000, that's made up mostly of services, contract services through the Plan Ops Department, through the IT Department, and some of the schools. So even though the number's fairly high, there's nothing that's unexpected in there for the year. Flip over the next page to property services, electricity, heating, gas, and water. I look at those as a whole. We're pretty much on line of where the spend was last year. We're a little lower on electricity. We're about 40,000 lower there. We're about 30,000 higher in the heating gas, but that's very lumpy. I mean, you notice there that you see December, January, you'll see big bills in February and March too. So by the end of the spring, we'll have a much tighter number on that. And then you see the 54421, the copier maintenance, that's 87,000. You note that in August was the first payment of 87, and January is the second payment of 87. That's how we pay. We pay an estimate up front based on previous year's costs. We pay the second half of that in January, and then we true everything up at the year end. We either get money back or we pay a little bit more. So based on the copies that we went over before, our black are running lower, our color's running higher. If we can drop down that color as we continue on in the year, then hopefully we're not going to have to pay any more than that when we get to the end of the year. Other than that, nothing too terrific. You'll look at the very bottom of that page, page 2, you see the transportation services. That's a big number, 681. But that's once again, that's 2 months. We're a little behind. The bills were coming in a little later. And flipping to the following page, page 3, same thing there with the special ed transportation services, 770,000. That's 2 months that we're caught up to. Tuition out of district, that's the line I talk about all the time. We did add a significant amount in the budget this year, 800,000. But if you take a look at where the spend is year to date on that, it's 3.4 million. And we only have left in that line 2.1 million, and we still have 5 months. I can tell you we'll spend more than 2.1 million in the last 5 months. Now, we do have a special revenue fund, which can help handle some of that extra cost, and I'll talk more about that as that number gets lower. And then on the supplies and materials, not too much. The only one that's much higher than most other months is medical supplies. You see that's 22,000 for the month, and that's the actual invoice for all the tourniquets that we purchased that we put into the budget this year. And other than that, that's the quick summary of that. Does anyone have any questions on anything in it? Okay, so then we'll move on to the next item, which is the transfer report. We'll run through this quickly. The first transfer, it actually says Department District Office. That's incorrect. The department is the Brentwood School. The person that filled it out didn't change that. So basically, they moved some money from supplies to a software line because they purchased Adobe licenses to use that in their curriculum with those students. The next one is Nashua High School North. They're moving $4,000 from the books line to the supplies line. This is specific to the CTE program, and the CTE program uses a lot of the same kind of supplies that Sean Smith might use in his thing as far as electrical supplies and wood for the woodworking, et cetera. So those costs have increased, so they're just moving money around. The next one is the North High School, and they're moving it from equipment repairs to media, and media is, it could be books, magazines, things like that. That was to purchase an order from Follett. The next one is a district office. This is the amount that we were over budget on the copy line. So basically, I took that money from the heating fuel line because I had to find money immediately. So I took it from the heating fuel line, I transferred it to the copy line, and that's what paid that second $87,000. So hopefully there will be that much surplus in the heating fuel. If not, then I'll have to make another transfer later in the year, but at this point, I'm hoping that it'll be there. The next one is Fairgrounds Middle School, and they're just moving money from supplies to software to purchase a software program for their tech ed classes. The next one is technology, and they had a contracted service that they stopped using the full amount of it through the year. So they had a little extra left in that account, and they moved it down, and they're purchasing, they have a conference room, and their chairs are in pretty bad shape, so they're moving that money to buy conference room chairs, and I think a couple new chairs also for the staff. The next one is also technology, once again from that contracted service that I just mentioned, and they're moving it to equipment, excuse me. And they want to purchase some laptops. They had no spares for any laptops, so someone like me who has a laptop, if my laptop went down, I wouldn't be able to do my job, so they need to have a few extras. And they'll probably use, they're not going to use them all as spares, obviously. They'll keep a few as spares, and they'll trade out some of the older ones for newer ones. New Searles Elementary School is the next one, and they are moving dollars from supplies into computer equipment so that they can purchase 10 Chromebooks for a grade 5 classroom. As the year goes on here, the school year goes on, you'll see more of these sort of transfers where they're taking them from supplies and moving them into equipment. It's sort of a natural movement. The next one is Bicentennial, and they are also moving things from a seminar line. They probably didn't send anyone to the conference and seminar, and they're using it to purchase computer equipment. And the last one is also the Bicentennial School, and they're purchasing iPads, so they moved some other amounts from seminars and supplies to computer equipment.
Can I just ask, have they used all of their money for technology already? Is that why it's being transferred?
Either that or they didn't budget that much in there in the first place. Because keep in mind, when the schools are doing their budget, we request that they do a budget in November, and then they're not actually spending the money until this is over a year later from that. So they do their budget so early, they may realize within the next year that, oh, we really want to upgrade some Chromebooks, so we want to do something else. But the amount of money we give to the schools isn't that great. And a lot of times they do budget it in supplies, figuring, okay, we might need all these supplies, and then maybe they end up not needing them all.
Okay. Any questions? Ms. Johnson?
Thank you. I went through this the other day. I was looking line item, compared it from here for the transfers. And some line items have quite a bit of money in there. Did we over budget some of the line items so we can spare some of the money to go in to some of the other line items?
I don't know the answer to that yet. It's, I think, too early we're only halfway through the school year as far as school items. I'll know more as we get towards the last 2 to 3 months, if we in fact, but when you're talking about a thing like educational supplies, we give the schools a certain amount of money, let's say $30,000. They budget it, they decide what to spend it on. They will spend all that $30,000. They may spend it on Chromebooks as opposed to supplies, but the way I look at the relatively small amount of money, $30,000, that we give to a school to manage all their supplies and equipment for a year. They're just moving things around. They're probably could use more than that to run the school, but we're sort of limited in what we can give them.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, if you just can do the whole report, just do the transfer report.
Mr. Guarino.
I move to approve the transfer report for December 2019.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Okay. Passes unanimously.
Okay, so the last item we have, I think we should probably go into non-public to discuss. Under
32E.
office litigation. Yeah, I thought there was two. But I think it might fit under
That
that.
might fit, because it's negotiations. Okay, we'll go on to, into non-public under RSA 91A:32E.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.